Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you. Hi, everybody. This is Ross Pallone with the Rossaround Backstage podcast, and I'm here today on the road with Bobby Herr, and he is a tour and production consultant and manager, and his past experiences have been on the road with Fleetwood Mac, Chris Isaak, Janet Jackson, Paula Abdul, Skaggs, Alanis Morissette, No Doubt, the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, Wheezer, and the Rolling Stones. And Bobby has had a wonderful career and has done lots of great things, as you can imagine with that list of people. I'm touring with Bobby right now. He has been sitting in as our production manager on the Chris Isaak tour. I'm real happy to have Bobby here, and I'm going to ask Bobby the first question of the day is, how'd you get into this business, Bobby?
Well, first I want to say, Ross, thanks for inviting me to be a part of your very successful podcast, and what a pleasure it's been to work with you just for this small amount of time, you know, filling in on this Chris Isaak thing. It's been a real joy to work with you guys in your camp. So this thing started in 1979 when I was in high school. I had a buddy of mine who came up to me, and he was a few years older than me. He was out of high school, and he was going to Saddleback College, and he said, "Hey, how'd you like to work this summer as a roadie?" And I didn't even really know what that was. So, right. So I was in high school, and, you know, you have the whole summers off, and I had some, you know, some interests in law enforcement and whatnot, and I wanted to make some money, so I said, sure. So I went and worked for this band called Jan and Dean, and Papa Do Run Run was was Jan and Dean's band, and they were performing at Disneyland all summer long in the Tomorrowland stage, the one that goes up and down. Uh-huh. And so it started there, and I worked with those guys for a couple summers till I graduated from high school, and believe it or not, even though I made pretty good money, and as you know, when you start in that thing, it's like you're the truck driver, you're the front of house engineer, or you learn to be a front of house engineer by twisting, you know, the little knobs on the little 16-channel thing that you might have out there.
Right.
And, you know, you do all the load-ins, you patch all the cables, set up all the mics, do all that stuff, and then load out and throw it in the Iveco truck and move to the next thing. So I kind of enjoyed that. I never thought I'd make any money in the music industry. So like I had mentioned before, I was always interested in law enforcement. So when I graduated from high school, I was working for San Clemente Police Department in a non-sworn position to make extra money. And then I went to the police academy. And to make a long story short, I went and I worked for Laguna Beach PD and then Newport Beach Police Department. And then during those times, I was getting my degree in recording arts from Golden West College in Huntington Beach, because I always had an interest in mixing music and being involved in the studio business. So that music interest was always there. And then it came to a point where I wasn't very happy in my law enforcement career. I was taking leaves of absence to go work with other artists filling in, and that led me into the Beach Boys. So I started working with the Beach Boys, and I started working as Carl Wilson's guitar tech, so for the Beach Boys. And then I did some stuff with Kenny Loggins and filled in for some other guitar techs and stage management positions for other bands, but nothing full-time. And then, so in 1987, I think that's right, 1987, yes, the Beach Boys made me an offer I couldn't refuse. When they made me an offer, I was like, "You want to pay me what?"
Really?
So, yeah, it was so much more than my law enforcement. So,
well, that seems like such an odd combination of interests.
You know,
law enforcement and the music business.
You know what's really interesting is people say that all the time or ask me why that is. But what I see, especially now, in a tour manager or a tour management position or a consulting, is that you have to be really organized, and certainly that job prepares you for that. You need to be organized. You need to be able to do tons of paperwork. You know, you have to be able to get along with people. You have to be to sometimes have a little bit of command presence in your job as a production manager and a tour manager to get things done. And that all falls, kind of in line with what I learned as a police officer.
Yeah.
So it is very different. But like I said, I always had an interest in music. I was always a big music listener when I was a kid. And I listened to all different genres of music. And it was a big part of my life. And since I grew up on the beach in San Clemente, I was a surfer. So, of course, that interest in surf music, and then it just kind of escalated up. So I was with the Beach Boys for about 6 years, and I went from Carl's guitar tech to stage manager to production manager to tour manager in 6 years. Yeah, I mean, I left as the road manager for the Beach Boys. So when I was out with the Beach Boys and I was road managing them, we did these summer tours with Chicago, the band Chicago. So it was these Beach Boys Chicago co-headlining. So I met these other guys, one of them being Marty Hom, who was the tour manager for Chicago. About a year later, after being with the Beach Boys for 6 years, he said, "Hey, I'm doing this tour, and we're putting it together for Paula Abdul. Do you want to come and do it?" And I said, "Sure." So I left the Beach Boys, and that was like in 1989, or I'm sorry, 1991, something like that. And I left the Beach Boys and went to work with Marty doing Paula as a road manager. So that was.
Why would you leave they're both very high profile artists. Was it money or?
You know what? It was with the Beach Boys. It was an amazing time so you can imagine, what we make now. So you can imagine when I started with the Beach Boys that early on, I was making like $750 a week, which was pretty good money back then. Mm-hmm. We got $50 a day per diem, which is unheard of.
Which is better than it is now.
Better than it is now.
Yeah.
And then we had full medical and dental and a 401k plan.
Wow.
So we had full bennies. So it made it really hard to leave, but the job was very, very stressful. These guys were really on top of their game. Kokomo had just come out. There was this huge resurgence of that band due partially, with VH1's big promotions that they were doing. They were giving away all these Corvettes and go see the Beach Boys on the road and all this other stuff that was going on. And there was this huge resurgence. And there were times when we were doing 2 shows a day in separate cities. So wow. We had a Bach 111 aircraft from Texas Air at Dallas. So we would hub out of a city like Chicago, like we'd be at the Ritz Water Tower in Chicago. So we would fly out and go do a AAA ball club where they would roll a stage out onto the field.
Yeah, I've done those before. Yeah.
And they bring the wagon train of speakers around.
Yeah.
And then you guys mix front of house. We'd do that, then we'd pile back on the plane and fly to Milwaukee to go do the shed that night.
So obviously you had a double set of
so
everything.
We had A rig and a B rig, and I was traveling with all of the guys in the band, all the side guys, wives, girlfriends, sometimes parents, sometimes kids, and I had about 100 pieces of luggage.
Wow.
So it got so complicated that, and I was taught this by the guy that hired me to be the road manager. His name was Elliot Lott. And he was the manager for the band. And basically we had these forms and they called them troop movements. So to literally figure out how my day was going to work, I would have to start at the end to when the last concert was over and when we were stepping on the plane and we were going to arrive in the next city backwards, so I knew when I had to leave the hotel. Yeah. So you have to imagine that there were 3 different sets of ground transportation because you would literally be in 3 cities in one day. So there was 3 different buses. We would use sit-up buses because it's the most economical, because you could put everyone on the bus, you could put all the luggage in the bays of the bus, and do that. But that's basically, so we would do that day after day after day. So it just became, and I did end up getting an assistant, but it became very stressful. I saw a lot of people that worked in that camp, in the Beach Boys camp especially, that had been there long before I was there. And I saw that if you didn't leave a band and go work with other artists, you never knew what it was going to be like. And then the longer you stay with an artist and the longer you're there, your opportunities to move to other acts and to see what it's like, because you don't have any connections.
Yeah, right.
You just have your small group of people, and if you're all there for 20 years or whatever, then nobody knows who you are.
Yeah,
and you don't meet anybody.
Yeah.
So that was one of the main reasons for leaving and taking the opportunity to go work with Paula and with Marty. And it was such a shock for me because I'm going from, this legend mainstream rock band, to pop star with dancers, choreography, huge sets, tons of video, all the stuff that we didn't have. So it was a real learning experience to deal with all of these people. Hair and makeup, all this. We didn't have hair and makeup on those tours. So we went from, this huge, or we went to this huge organization of buses and trucks and, multiple stage managers. And, so it was a real eye opener, and having to do travel and just being involved in it. And it was a great, great experience. And we went.
Would you say it was a little easier then, or maybe a little less stressful?
It was a little.
Both of them are big deals.
They're big deals, but I think for me, because Paula's tour only lasted for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, it was such a new experience that was really exciting. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of new things to learn, and it really became like very challenging and stuff like that. So right after that tour, we moved straight into Janet Jackson. So we did the Janet tour. Was
this with the same production managers and a lot of the same people?
Yes, a lot of the same people. We moved right into that camp. And
a lot of that was probably your choice, though, right? Because you could, as the tour manager, you could kind of select your...
Mostly Marty, because I was more in a road management kind of position for those tours, and he was the boss. But yes, we got together and talked about people that we wanted and that we needed, and that we would get this group. And it just made a lot of sense to take, now that this tour is over, let's take all these people that have been working so hard over here and just shift them right over. So that made a lot of sense. And there's no, I guess, learning each other's ways kind of thing, unfamiliar. Everybody knew what everyone was going to do, and it was more like, we're going to do like we did on Paula, or we're going to do, we're going to do these movements like we did on Paula.
So you just change it artists,
basically,
and everybody else stays the same.
It's like the joke, it's like you're a crew or you're a band and you're looking for an artist,
Yeah, right.
After that, after I got done with Janet, it started to slow down a little bit, and I started to work kind of in the jazz world a little bit. So I went to go work for Hiroshima.
Yeah.
So we were doing small stuff. So we were like we are now, like a one-truck tour. Through that, I started working with people like Boz Skaggs and Michael McDonald, because a lot of it was the same management.
Yeah.
And the same kind of genre, and people were doing it.
Same kind of gigs, too.
Same kind of gigs, exactly. Yeah. And then I had one of the artists I didn't mention, which were one of my favorite artists of all time, was Tower of Power from the Bay Area.
Oh.
So I had Tower for a year and a half as the tour manager, and we traveled all around the world. That was really an amazing experience. And I will have to say that's one of the bands that I could watch them perform every show. It was just like amazing to watch that horn section and that rhythm section, and it was.
Now, were you traveling with trucks and buses with them, or was it more fly dates and stuff?
No, we did a little bit of both. But we, when we were in the States, we had a truck and we had 2 buses, and because the group was large and we had a big crew, and when we flew overseas, it was mostly just fly dates and rented gear, and we would perform in every IA country in the world. And they were huge over there. It's just like you could take Tower of Power and not sell a night out at a place like the Coach House or the Grove, but you could sell at the Budokan for 2 nights in Japan.
Yeah.
There are those kind of artists with those kind of crossovers. So they made all their money in those other international markets.
Yeah. It's amazing how that works. I know
insane.
I had that experience. I was on tour with Michael McDonald years ago, and we were opening for Tina Turner, who probably couldn't have sold out the Coach House at that time. But over there, we were playing 100,000 seat venues.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. After that, I kind of bounced around in the jazz world a little bit. I started, I did something that was totally unusual. I tour managed Steve Perry for a solo project after he left Journey for his solo tour. And the reason that came about, too, another artist I forgot. So I tour managed Seal for a long time. And they were all part of Atlas Third Rail. So when I started working with Bob Cavallo at Atlas Third Rail before he went to Hollywood to run Hollywood Records for Disney, I had Seal, Steve Perry, and Wheezer. So it was interesting to go from, like, the artists that I've been working with. I'm kind of an older guy now. In the industry.
Right.
So now I'm taking, it's like, hey, I need someone to come out and work with Wheezer, and this is just when they were, right after they took off, So I'm out with these kids playing clubs, mosh pits, frickin' drinking, just like insanity, arguing. It was just like, it was and traveling all over the world with these guys. It was just like insane. So it was like culture shock. But they're very talented guys, and just like Rivers is like, they were all like crazy smart kind of thing.
Really?
So, oh yeah, totally crazy smart.
That's a big difference, traveling with a young band like that.
Yeah,
than
totally.
the other kind of more mature artists.
Well, Rivers, I think just 4 years ago, got his doctorate from Harvard. He was going to Harvard when I was tour managing them.
Wow.
And a couple of the other guys in the band were. It's not like you would walk by these guys' bunks in the in the bus, and you see like Popular Mechanics laying there, or the Economists, or it's like sitting there. These guys were very smart guys, but they were punk rockers, or post-punk guys.
Yeah.
Crazy. From there, I started doing some work with No Doubt. I was with those guys for a year or so.
Was that when they first came out?
No, they had been. It was for the Hella Good tour. So it was one of the actually, like, maybe the third to the last tour that they did together as a band. And then Gwen started doing her own solo stuff, and then they would come back together as a band.
Yeah.
So it was right before Gwen broke off to do her own thing. Those guys were great. It was super fun. They were selling out, really young artists and really talented. And she was fantastic.
Was she a nice person to work with?
Sweet person.
That's good to hear.
Yeah,
I always like to hear that.
Super sweet, super sweet. After that, I did get hired. It was funny because I kind of got pushed into a new realm during this time, and I might have mixed the two up, but I kind of got pushed into a new kind of promoter realm, which gave me the whole nother side of the business to look at from a promoter standpoint. So I was going to go out and do Boston as the tour manager. And they canceled the tour at the very last second, like the last week of May, beginning of June. So we all know that, like, if you're on for a summer tour and you get canceled, you're spending the whole summer at home. It's going to be, like, impossible to find a job.
Yeah.
It's bad for us.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. And Brian Murphy from Avalon, before, Live Nation and all those other companies that took over, from Avalon called and said, "Hey, I'm here. You're sitting at home." And I was like, "Yeah, I am." And he's like, "I need a promoter rep for Irvine Meadows this summer." And I was like, I'm not doing anything. I'm your guy. So I came into that doing, like, from a totally different, I was like, booking the stagehands, advancing shows with actual artists, looking at it from the perspective of money from a promoter's.
Right, you're looking.
Now I'm on the other side.
Yeah,
on the other side, and so I kind of got a lot of it, and then so it was really interesting to be there and being forced to be there. So, like I was saying, it was very interesting to be thrown into this promoter rep kind of world and working for, like, the evil empire.
Yeah.
Or,
the people that I'm fighting with all the time.
Right,
we're
exactly.
fighting with all the time.
No,
we need that.
Yeah, exactly. And here I am with, I got to make a paycheck. I might as well do this job.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to, work with all these different artists coming through your building and having to deal with stagehands and having to deal with budgets and dealing with the box office and settling shows. And it gave me a better perspective on what actually they go through and, how it affects them financially. due to lack of ticket sales or, whatnot, or expenses. When I worked for Brian Murphy at Avalon, that also afforded me a chance to become, since he had bought a bunch of the Stones shows for the Bridges tour, and prior to that, Pop Mart, the U2 Pop Mart tour. So it afforded me the opportunity to work on shows of that scale, with the Stone, basically with Jake Berry and Opie and people of that nature, that were hired by obviously the artists to do those shows. But I was working for Avalon as a site coordinator for all the West Coast states, because they had all bought all the West Coast states from like Arizona, New Mexico, all of California. So I got to basically go in and build the city. So,
these are huge.
It's huge. They would have, steel trucks come in to these stadiums, and there'd be 40 trucks of steel alone, and of support. So it was pretty crazy. I remember my loadouts taking 52 hours sometimes, and I would be up the whole time, which was insanity. But also another great experience to look at touring on that scale, if you were in that kind of a production. I never want to do it ever again. It was enough.
I've never.
It's so much work.
Done that.
It's crazy. It's crazy work. I get why it's a young man's game, and those guys that love to be up for hours on end and working their asses off. It's a young man's business over at that end of the spectrum. Maybe not for the guys standing on stage, but
is the money that people are paid, like that are in our kind of positions, is it like way more, or
not necessarily?
Kind of the same.
It's kind of the same. It's all relative. It all has to do with budgets. It all has to do with experience, and your particular job on the tour. I would imagine that if I was doing a tour of that nature and I was the tour manager, I'd obviously be making a lot more money. But the scope of your responsibility is astronomical.
Yeah.
I don't like to play in that arena anymore. In that big, I did it for a while, and I'm quite happy to be where I am now.
Yeah, and back on the good side of things, right?
Yeah, totally, yeah. So my buddy Marty Hom, who's got me a lot of work. Thank you very much, Marty. I was going to take so we'll skip forward to 2003. So I was going to take the summer off, just hang out at home and be with my kids, because they were pretty much younger then, and just go to the beach. And so Marty calls me, and he's doing Fleetwood Mac, and he says, "Hey, we're firing our stage manager. Can you step in here for like the tour's going to go out for the summer for like 2 or 3 months. Can you please do it? I'll pay you this, blah, blah, blah." And subsequently, loadout for production rehearsals was the very next day. So they'd already been through band rehearsals and production rehearsals. They were getting ready to load out. They were shit canning their stage manager. So I talked to my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do it?" So I went up and did it. 15 years later, I'm still here.
As a stage manager?
No. Oh. So I started out as a stage manager, and then I became the production manager, and I've been the production manager for the last 13 years. So I've been with them, and then I subsequently do Stevie Nicks' solo stuff. I have done some of Lindsay and Christine, last year Lindsay and Christine's stuff. Yeah, that's kind of where I sit right now.
Yeah, well,
and we're getting ready to start all over again. And here it is.
Yeah, you're going out again now because you're leaving us, the Chris Isaak tour, to go do that. I'm really kind of jealous of that, because Fleetwood Mac's always been, one of my top, top 10 bands. I just love Fleetwood Mac. I love all their music. I love their singers. Right. I like everything about Fleetwood Mac.
So I'm sure I forgot a lot, but we're old.
Yeah, but I'm going to back you up. I'm not going to let you get away with a half hour of talking.
Course.
So you got to tell me about. Well, let's just give you a choice. Tell me some interesting stories about a particular artist. Something that stands out in your career that was like either horrible or great or or just notable?
I got a couple. So some of most of the experiences I would share would be mostly positive. Doing the Beach Boys, that was obviously my first shot into the bigs, and it was a crazy, crazy world. And you really never got a sense of, I would say, till after I left and later on, about what a privilege it was to work with those guys and at the level that they were and where they actually sit as icons in the music industry. It's
absolutely
it's
like
huge.
The Beatles. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to work with Brian a little bit, which was amazing. I remember as far as like really a fun tour was Paula's tour, because she was brand new and we had all this young energy around. So we had like all these dancers and hair and makeup people, and it was kind of tongue in cheek, and Paula loved to have a good time too. And so we would, the band buses, and the band was great. It was an amazing band.
How many people would give us an idea of the size?
The entourage, there was probably
buses, trucks, number of people.
In Paula's, I would say we were probably about a good 10 to 12 semis, and which nowadays isn't really that huge. Mm-hmm. And then we were like 12 buses, but I had 4 buses just on the band side. So because I had us and management, band, dancers, Paula traveled on a bus.
She had her own bus.
She had her own bus with her hair and makeup people and blah. But it was kind of cool because we'd be driving down the road, after a gig, and we'd get out of there and we'd get on the thing, and then like the buses would pull over, and then we'd all switch buses. Like we'd go jump on each other's buses and have like freaking dance parties and have cocktails, and everybody was welcome on everybody's bus. And then we'd head down the road, and and then the bus drivers were cool. They loved it. They thought it was great. And so we'd pull over again, and then everybody get on their prospective buses and head down the road and check into the next hotel, the next morning. Right. So it was always fun like that. We had bowling parties all the time, dinners all the time. We had a roller skating party one time. We rented a roller rink. It was.
Those are the kind of stories that
it was great.
You don't
it was
hear
so much
very
fun.
often. And what I think a lot of the people, fans, think that it is like all the time.
Right.
But in fact, that is very rare.
It's very rare.
Yeah,
it's very
just
rare.
Doesn't happen.
And quite honestly, it was our team and our management people that kind of made that happen, because it's so easy to just go, screw you guys. We'll just every day punch in a clock. And we didn't want to do that, And we just started to, and it just like totally lifted that morale, with a group of people that big. And, we had times on Paula's tour and Janet's tour, and it was kind of the same way on Janet too, because like I said, it was a lot of the same people, but the crew needed relief, kind of thing. It's like these guys are working their butts off and stuff, so we would get promoters or bars or hotels and stuff like that, or restaurants, and just tell the production manager, take everybody to dinner. Open bar, let them have a good time. Let's rent a DJ. Let's, play some music, and we'll stop by too, and just have, so there was all this relief from your job, and it just became a real team thing, and a real morale booster. And that's one of the things I loved about those tours. I think the most favorite tour that I ever did, as far as like comfort and fun, was a tour I did with Dan Fogelberg.
Oh.
So I did a tour with Dan, and it was a solo tour. So I was his tour manager, and it was just me and him. It was me, him. No band. Uh-huh. It was me, him, and 2 pilots and a Learjet. That was it. And then we had a truck on the road and a production manager and a couple crew guys. And we had a front of house guy, of course, and a monitor guy. But Dan, basically, we had a grand piano. He played acoustic guitar. He told stories. It's very much like JT does, or James Taylor does on some of those projects that he does. So when I first met Dan, he lived in this big, huge house up in the Continental Divide in Colorado, facing the Continental Divide in Colorado, because he's like Colorado's son, during this time. And Dan's had these huge hits and well known. And so when I first meet him, I went to his house and I drove up there from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so I drove up there and there was like, you had to like cross a creek and like drive down this, BLM, road and like through these things and like, okay, now you're going to turn here and you're going to see a gate and there's a keypad on the gate. So I'll push this keypad. And then I heard Dan's voice on the keypad. So he let me on and he says, just keep following up. And I swear to God, his driveway was like a mile.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just driving up this dirt road and you're going up and up and up in the Colorado Rockies and you're going up and up. And then you crest the top of this hill and get to the top of this hill. And there's this giant, like 4,000 square foot log cabin sitting on this lake up there at the top in this clearing. And I'm like, wow, Dan, this is amazing. He goes, keep driving. That's the guest house.
Oh, no.
So I keep driving. And it come up. 8,000 square foot log cabin sitting there, majestically, in the Rockies, and it's all perfect. And so
anyways, they did pretty well on that first couple records, huh?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's another story about that too. He was involved with Irving and Frontline, so I think that's a lot of the dosh came from there too.
Uh-huh.
I went in and he fancied himself as a chef, and he turned out to be a really good chef. So I worked with him for quite a while, and so he was like, all right, well, sit down. I've got some rules. This is the first time I meet this guy.
So he didn't know you at all?
He didn't know me at all.
Uh-huh.
He had just talked to me on the phone a couple times, and that was it. His usual tour manager was Charlie Fernandez. But Charlie,
met him.
Yeah, but yeah. Charlie was out doing Jimmy Buffett. So he was like, hey, can you fill in for me? He also happens to live in my hometown. When I first met Dan, he was like, hey, I got these 3 rules, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, my God, this guy's an asshole. Right? So he's like pouring like $300 bottles of wine in this massive kitchen, and he's making us food. And he goes, number 1, I never show up at the venue more than 30 minutes before I go on stage. And I go, okay, I can live with that. Number 2, I do my encore, I wave goodnight, we get in the limo, we go back to the plane to fly wherever we're hubbing out of. I said, I can certainly live with that, with a police escort. Number 3, and this is the most important, we never get back to the hotel before last call. I said, I can work with this guy. And it was hilarious.
You mean after last call? You never get back there after last call?
Yeah, never get back there before there's last call, you can't get a drink.
Yeah.
So, of course, we would, because we'd be flying on this private jet, and we'd be hubbing like out of the Ritz West Palm Beach or something, and, flying and doing shows all over that part of the world, that part of the seaboard. And so we would come back, and I had a deal with the bartender, and we would walk it'd be like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning by the time we would get back to the hotel. I'd walk there, and there'd be 2 martinis sitting on the bar with just the bartender sitting there like a movie and nobody else in the bar.
He was getting a big tip.
He got a big tip. Yeah. He was getting a big tip. Yeah. And that was the thing. Dan liked to spend money, and Dan liked to eat, and Dan liked good wine. Actually, I had to go buy a suit, because basically how the day would work out is he would call me like at 11 o'clock in the morning. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just getting up, shooting some emails, advancing some shows. Want to get something to eat? Yeah, sure. Where do you want to go? I'll meet you at the pool bar. So we go down to the pool bar, order some food, watch CNN. Then we're like, well, now what do you want to do? He's like, I was thinking about taking a nap. Okay, I'll go take a nap. And then we'd meet in the lobby like for dinner. And we had an early dinner. So a lot of times we would eat at the Ritz-Carlton. And so I'd have to wear a suit into these swanky restaurants that he loved to eat in.
Yeah.
So we'd have to go eat. And he of course, picked up the tab for everything. We're ordering $300 bottles of wine and eating these extravagant meals. And then go change our stuff, get in the limo, go get in a plane, go do a show, come back, do it all over again the next day.
So he didn't want his work day to really be a work day.
No.
He wanted his work day to be a couple hours.
Yes, exactly.
And that's it,
and
out of the 24.
Great. He was such a great guy and so humble. And, he was one of those artists was like, I want it like this, like this, and this, which I can totally live with. I get it.
Yeah, you didn't ask for anything.
No,
really.
No, he didn't ask for anything. It's like, it's got to be this way, and we'll be just fine. And after that, everything was golden. And
how long did you do that?
I was with him for 2 summers. When he was just doing his summer.
And he would
stuff.
just go out for the summer.
He would just go out for the summer. So that was really awesome.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. It
sounded very decadent. Yeah.
It was very decadent.
Yeah.
It's like, people always say, who was your favorite artist? And I'm like, well, I'm going to be selfish and tell them why it was my favorite artist, you know?
Right.
Dan Fogelberg. Yeah. Oh my God. It was amazing.
And this was years after he had his big hits then.
Oh,
too,
years.
right?
Years. And you realize that, there's those artists out there like Mike, like Michael or Boz and stuff like that.
They can keep doing it.
They can just keep doing it and doing their hits and, Steely Dan, Donald Fagen and people like that.
Sure.
Go out there and crush it and just keep a steady thing going. And God bless them. Those are the artists that I like to work with. I mean, as I certainly get older, I'm more inclined to hang out with those guys because, I know I'm going to get paid the kind of money that I want. I know that they want me. And I know that, it's going to be a decent schedule. That's why I've stayed with Fleetwood for so long and with Stevie for so long is, it's a big production, playing arenas. It's just big enough that you don't lose control over it. And then it's like a formula and they like things done a certain way. And it's a big, huge family. And, there's certainly some drama at sometimes. That's that's involved in the process, or
Well, Fleetwood Mac, there's been well documented drama.
Absolutely.
That band for sure.
And for sure. But overall, at the end of the day, it's all hugs and kisses and family, and everybody gets treated really well on those tours, and that's the most important thing. Is I hear horror, as I'm sure you do too. I just hear horror stories about some of these tours that are out there where artists aren't nice to the people. They treat their crew like crap. They're working, doing 5 in a rows with impossible jumps between cities where they're, possibly losing shows, or their crew guys are working from 5 o'clock in the morning till doors just to get it in the building. It's
and that's not fun.
That's not fun. And
a
lot of and we all know that the majority of the business is like that.
Yeah.
We haven't all been blessed to work at the level that we work at, or with the artists that we get to work with. And and I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. And I feel blessed. People always say, "Are you sorry you ever left, law enforcement?" And the only reason I'm sorry is because all my friends are retired now, and I could be retired. But
right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Where's my pension?
Yeah, you lost that pension. Didn't
I lost that pension a long time ago. But I really wouldn't change it for anything in the world. I couldn't imagine showing up in a suit and tie and going work in a cubicle somewhere, or not working with people like yourself and all these people that become family out here, and it's a real brother and sisterhood.
I definitely feel like when my daughters, I have 3 daughters, when they talk to me about, they say, "Man, it's so cool what you do," and I have to agree, it's really cool. I mean, I'm sure that you've had some times when you're like going, I don't have any work and I don't have anything booked for a month or 2 or something, and it gets a little panicky. But overall, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's funny because I know it's true for me, and I think it's true for a lot of people that I talk to. I think that we all in the touring industry, like you said, get into some kind of panic mode, when it's like, have finished tours and gone, I don't have anything lined up. But it always seems like something happens.
Something always does happen.
Something always happens, and I don't want to sound like a hippie, weird karma guy, because I'm not that way, but I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and that you end up working with people that you work with, and there's a reason for that. And I think, as you can attest, this business isn't as big as everybody thinks it is.
Right.
Everybody knows if you're good at your job, you will work all the time. Mm-hmm. Or most of the time, we hope.
Yeah. I mean, something does pop up, and
something
people
always
recommend
pops
you.
up. Yeah, and people, if you are good at your job, if you are not good at your job, you're going to find those times few and far between.
Yeah, well, if you're not good at your job, your career's going to be short-lived.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or if you're you could be good at your job, but you could be a jerk, and that
there is that part of
that part.
There's
too.
that part
There's
too.
a lot of those too.
Yeah, because nobody, whether you're good or not, nobody wants to work with an asshole.
That's for sure. Yeah, a very important part of touring.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're on a tour bus with 8, 9, 10, maybe 12 people or something. If you got one horrible person on there, can poison the whole thing. So
Absolutely.
You don't want to be involved in that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, because we share a common bond with Michael McDonald, because I worked for him for like 10, 12 years.
Right.
What was your experience with Michael? When were you working with him? Who was in the band at the time?
I would have to really look back. When I worked with Mike was when I was filling in for production managers and tour managers, which was funny. In his camp, and same with Boz, it happened a lot.
Yes.
Like I was like you probably had the same experience.
Yeah, when I worked for him, there was different tour managers, production managers coming and going.
So I was floating, and we might have been there at the same time for all I know. But I would float in and take Alan Tate's place.
Yes, I worked with him.
Yeah, and for both Boz and because Craig Fruin was managing him at the time.
Both of them.
Both of them at the time. And so I kind of worked my way into that camp. So it was over a course of years. But what I do remember about Michael was, and one of the reasons I list him, even though I wasn't there for like years on end, and I would just come in a couple times a year, maybe for a week or two here, is I just loved working with the man because he was such a sweet guy.
He is, and you
And
can talk to
he was always
100
like, Bobby Herr, what's going on, brother?
Yeah.
And it was the band was changing with different guys all the time. So I can't remember a lot of them, but I just remember, plus that music is, Michael's voice, who doesn't recognize Mike's voice, So he's one of the artists that I do mention because he was such a great guy and he's so talented and just a sweetheart to be on the road with and just so easygoing.
If you talk to 100 people that have worked with Michael McDonald, you will get 100 positive reviews of Michael McDonald.
I agree.
Everybody who has ever worked with him or ever even just met him will just tell you he is one of the sweetest and most kind,
and I had a similar experience with Boz as well.
Business.
I
never worked with Boz.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Boz. Very down to earth. Music's great. He always surrounded himself with great musicians and really easygoing. And Boz is another one that kind of like things, was like Dan, kind of like, I like it like this. And you just did it that way and everything was gravy after that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Alanis Morissette.
So I came into Alanis's world when she was she started out like as a Nickelodeon star in Canada. When she was young. When I was working for Cavallo at Atlas Third Rail, doing Wheezer and Seal and Steve Perry, there was a day-to-day manager there named Scott Welch. And Scott had found this girl. And I remember the day we went to lunch from the office. I was up there, talking about tours that were coming up or doing budgets or something like that. And we went to lunch and got in his little Ford Explorer, rickety Ford Explorer, and he threw this cassette tape in and he played it and he goes, I'm thinking about signing this girl to a deal. And I said, well, if you don't, I will.
Was it her first album?
It was her first album. So the funny thing about Alanis is that her first album was pretty much in the can before they even shopped it. She had done the record with Ballard, mm-hmm. and they had written a bunch of stuff, and they basically went in the studio, and she had some money, and Atlas had some money, and they put some money into it, so they had this frickin' huge product that they just got top dollar for, and obviously Alanis' career went frickin' berserko from there.
Oh, yeah.
But basically, I got hired to work with Alanis to put together her first tour. So when she was going out and she was brand new, you know, she's playing like the small theaters and stuff like that. So I put the lighting deal together, the sound deal. I staffed it. You know, I hired a production manager, hired a tour manager and lighting designer, and basically started the baby band, but with some real support behind it. So that was my experience with Alanis until she just became super huge. And then it just got to a point where I could pass it off to their tour and production management and to management, and then off it went.
So that would be your consulting part of your career.
Yes.
You didn't really go on the road with them?
No,
then?
I just spent, I just did a few of the West Coast dates, just to make sure everything was up and running and everything was fine and she was happy and, management was happy, and that was it.
Now, was she easy to deal with too, or was she a little harder?
She's a little harder.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
I'm not asking you to say anything negative about her, but
no. She definitely had her way, and it could be difficult at times.
Mm-hmm.
I think it got more difficult for people after I got done with her, and I heard a lot more stories about things that went down with her, and people that worked in her camp way after that. And
she had a little acting.
Yes.
Some acting stuff
Absolutely.
thrown in there, too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and she had gotten some of that acting stuff from Nickelodeon, when she was a kid. So that's where that all came from in Canada. So she was kind of a known little, if you can imagine, like, I had Christina Aguilera as well when she was brand new.
Oh,
and
really?
I actually did tour manage her and put her tours together in the very beginning when she was, she had just turned 17 years old when I got her. I did her first.
Really? I didn't realize that she was that young when she...
Oh, yeah.
Is that,
she was tiny. How old was because she came from the Mickey Mouse Club. Oh, she was in the Mickey Mouse Club with Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, and some of those people.
Oh.
So it came from the Mickey Mouse Club back when they were little kids. And so they started in the entertainment industry, obviously very, 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 very young.
Yeah.
So, but Christina, she has a serious frickin' voice.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
I remember when I got her and started working with her, and Ron Fair was her producer. She was, she's like 5'0" and, weighs 70 pounds dripping wet at the time, when I first got her, and that voice that came out of that little tiny body, I couldn't believe it. She's, singing these amazing, iconic songs, and plus having her own little pop hits and stuff like that. But she had some pipes on her. Holy crap.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
I did some work with MTV, and she came in and did a concert for some show where the artist does a song and then they talk to the audience and answer questions and stuff. Right. And I couldn't believe it when I saw her. She's like so tiny.
Yeah, tiny.
She was just really tiny. And, I got to hear her sing live, and she was just fantastic.
Yeah.
Great voice. Just
I think
amazing.
one of my other favorite artists to work with, and she would kill me because she probably would listen to your podcast, is Sheryl Crow.
Oh, so another person I'm a fan of.
Yeah, so I had Sheryl. Sheryl is totally down to earth, a total real person, just a sweetheart, can sing her ass off.
Yeah.
I worked with Sheryl just till recently for like 2.5 years as her production manager. And it came by way of a friend of mine who is a lighting designer, actually Arlo Guthrie, Paul Guthrie, is we call him Arlo. But he designs Chris's shows in the past before Jared got here. And then he designs Fleetwood shows and Stevie shows, and then was working for Sheryl, and Sheryl needed a production manager, and she's like, hey, Bobby's not doing anything. Why don't you... So their management hired me, and I just adore that woman.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about her.
She's so amazing, and she's such a sweetheart, and so great to work with. And I stayed with her for as long as I could, and she actually retained me, and which was amazing, because that doesn't happen very often in this business anymore. But it just got to a point where she was spending a lot more time with their boys who were in elementary school. So obviously being a parent became more important, as it would.
Yeah.
If you're of that stature.
Yeah.
So, the touring just she'll just go out and do some stuff during the summer, and she'll do like corporates and stuff like that. But the touring schedule for her isn't very massive and not enough to warrant, a full-time production manager anymore.
Yeah.
So that was a bummer, but still, it led to other things, and
everything does, doesn't it?
Yeah, everything does. And we still keep in contact and email and talk on the phone, or she'll be playing in LA somewhere and I'll pop in on her, and yeah, she's fantastic. Before I came to you guys, I was doing Lionel Richie. So Lionel's great. He's also super awesome and super dynamic, and talk about a man of his age. I think he's 67 now.
Mm-hmm.
And that man is all over the stage, and he's like in better shape than I am. And he's just like moving and grooving. So when I first started working for him 2 years ago, or a little less than 2 years ago, we started doing stadiums in South America and South Africa, and then in like the UK. And it was just, everything was subbed. Like, we showed up with like backline gear. We rented backline gear, all the sound and lights, all the video, everything was subbed out for every single show.
Mm-hmm.
And we were selling out stadiums. And it was crazy.
Was the reason for that was because of the logistically you couldn't use trucks and buses?
A lot of it was logistically, a lot of it was saving money.
Oh.
Which is something I'm not a big fan of when you're doing things on that level.
Yeah.
With him, I ended up in Vegas, and he had a residency at Planet Hollywood. So it was Lionel, Jennifer Lopez, and Britney. We would split our time. So we would do, like Lionel would come in for a week and a half and do shows, and then Britney would come in. They'd turn the stage over, and Britney would do shows for, a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then J-Lo would come in and do her shows. So we did that for a few months and in Vegas, and that was fun too. But Lionel's a great guy and super talented. And
still can sing too, right?
Oh my God, he can sing his butt off.
Yeah.
Yeah, still can sing. Everybody in that camp, especially from, Chucky Booker's the MD, and all the guys in the band are just phenomenal and super fun to hang out with, and it's a really, really good camp.
You most certainly have had an amazing career. You have worked with, some huge people. I mean, and you mentioned the Stones, but you weren't actually working for the Stones.
No, I wasn't working for the Stones. I didn't work for U2. I just worked for, I was a site coordinator. So, I never met those guys.
And not only have you worked for all kinds of great people, but you've had all kinds of different kinds of responsibilities, different jobs, not just production management, and, working for the promoter, site survey. I mean, these are all things that how do you how does a person even learn all this? It
just becomes it's like something that's forced on you, and sometimes it's a financial choice you have to make, and it's like I'm sure we all go through it. It's like, here's this opportunity to do this, whether it be a promoter thing or whatever, or be a site coordinator, but I got to make money.
Yeah, you got to take the job.
Yeah, I got to pay bills and feed 2 boys and a wife and do all that stuff. And then it affords you walk away from it like, oh, now I kind of understand why they bitch about this, or like why they're concerned about these kind of things and why we shouldn't do this. And I'm kind of seeing, it's really interesting to take those kind of, because it gives you a better, broader scope. And it wasn't like on purpose. It just happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I've been in this business for over 40 years, and it was only in the last 10 years that I got forced into. I never asked to be. I've been a tour manager. I've been a production manager, but it's always been with acts that weren't touring with big trucks and buses and stuff. It was always situations where we're we're doing backline. We're getting everything backlined. We're
Right.
flying most places.
Right.
Maybe there might be part of the tour where we're going to have a truck and a bus, but it would be short-lived. It would only be for
Sure.
a week or two or something. So I've never done. So when I started talking to you and learned about all the things that you do, I'm like, this guy's a god, 'cause,
Oh, please.
well, to me, when I think about being a production manager on the level that I've been, and then I look at being a production manager in the level where you are, where you told me, I think, with Fleetwood Mac, you've got like 17 buses, or 17 trucks, right?
Yeah, we'll be 15 to 17. We'll be probably somewhere around six buses. I'll have a touring entourage of about 70.
See, that scares me.
But you know what? The funny,
I wouldn't. I mean, first of all, I wouldn't accept that job because
Right.
it's just way beyond.
But like I've said before, it's kind of interesting because it becomes like any job, I guess. It becomes like a formula. So like things at that level have to happen a certain way. Mm-hmm. And there's a formula, for how things need to be done. So luckily with that camp, once you spend, and they love to rehearse. We're going to spend a month in band rehearsals at Sony Studios in Culver City, and then we'll spend another month in production rehearsals.
Wow.
So by the time that thing's going out the door, it's so organized. It's organized down to truck packs.
Uh-huh.
Guys have plenty of time just sitting around just figuring how their truck packs are going to go, and every little piece of staging that's needed to be tweaked will be tweaked. Every little piece of lighting, any automation that we're doing or video-wise, band gear, everything will all have been tweaked and ready to go. So then when it goes, it's organized and it happens a certain way every single load in every day. Unless obviously you have problems with whatever, something breaks down or whatever, which always happens.
Right.
But it's so organized by that point that it does become, even though it's exciting, but it does become like not a big mystery of like, I don't walk in the door and go, geez, I wonder how this is going to go.
Yeah, how am I going to do that? Yeah.
Well, how's this going to roll out today? It happens the same way. The same trucks are in the dock at the in the same docks, in the same order.
And that's the beauty of an arena tour,
Yes.
because you can do that. Kind of like what we're doing now with Chris Isaak, or
this job can be more labor intensive.
Everything is different every day, but
Absolutely.
arenas are arenas, and
Right.
they're pretty much, they all have big docks. They all have this empty space that you're going to fill.
Yeah.
And so it is the same every day, pretty much.
And sometimes doing shows on the level that we're doing them, where we're going into these small, we went from Napa, which was a postage stamp of a stage, where, backline guys are in hallways and monitor worlds in a hallway, to walking into the Grand Resort in, the very next show in Reno, and the stage is like
Huge.
It's like one of the biggest stages on the West Coast.
Yeah.
In this giant casino.
Yeah.
So it's like it's different every day for us, and we have to figure it out. There's a lot more to figure out.
Yeah.
You always know that when you're going into an arena, you're going to have there's going to be plenty of dressing rooms. They're going to be a certain size. You're always going to have furniture. You're going to know exactly where offices go. You've been in these buildings 100 times. Mm-hmm. You know where everything is. The crew chiefs. The people that run the building. All that stuff. Whereas we go into these other things and it's like a big mystery. And it's like, okay, how are we going to figure this out?
I know probably with the Fleetwood Mac Tour, you're hiring nothing but the best of backline guys, audio guys, lighting guys.
So, yeah.
Everybody. I know that Dave Morgan is your front of house.
Yeah.
And he's phenomenal. He's one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
Can't get any better than Dave Morgan. And I'm sure that everybody in your crew is like that. Your lighting guy, I'm sure he's phenomenal.
Yeah, Paul Normandale is doing it this time. Like I said, it's been Arlo in the past. Paul does Coldplay and Shakira and a bunch of other people. So he's of that caliber and of that size. But yeah, we tend to surround ourselves with people that have been there for a while, and also people that are way up the food chain as far as in the class of where they work.
Yeah, top of their game.
Yeah,
people.
top of their game. Yeah.
Sure.
Because it does require that amount of tension.
Yes.
As you know, you gotta be on your game, and these principals in this band require a lot of attention. Whether they're set in their ways or whatever you want to say, they require a certain amount of attention. And when you hire the right people that are going to take care of them and give 110%, you don't hear from your principals. Mm-hmm. And we don't hear from your principals, everybody's happy.
Yeah.
So
no news is good news.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Just everything just goes smooth.
Right.
Yeah. Other than equipment breaking down,
that
probably
happens.
Just you're probably not going to have too many big problems.
No.
Once it's rolling.
Once it's rolling, it's
and how long are you going to be out with Fleetwood?
We have so we start our rehearsals August 1st, and our first date is October 1st in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have dates all the way through April of next year. We do have obviously a good holiday break, December, January, portion of both months. And then when we get done in April, we'll take a little bit of a break. And I foresee us going to the UK and Europe. Mm-hmm. And then we'll take another break. And then we'll go to Australia, New Zealand. And then we'll see where it goes from there. A lot of times in the past years, after we've done those kind of rounds, we've come back and done like B markets. So for those of you who don't know what B markets are, we'll do like play the arena in Boise, Idaho. We'll play Grand Rapids. We'll play,
smaller markets, but they probably still sell out.
Smaller markets, but they'll still do well. So we'll go and we'll do like the B markets, and it'll do really well, and then probably call it after that. But generally, these tours end up being a year to year and a half.
Yeah. From
start to finish.
With some sizable breaks.
With some sizable breaks. And their schedule isn't that hard. Uh-huh. These guys are older, and so we're doing an average of like 3.5 shows a week, if you would average it out,
mm-hmm.
4 shows a week at the very, very most. Not a lot of back-to-backs. And
you really kind of can't.
No, and a lot of time off.
You can't do a back-to-back when you have that size of production.
Right.
Because do you go into a venue in the morning and do a show that night, or is it a 2-day?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Oh, okay.
So I can get a show in 5 hours, and I can get that show out in 2.5 hours.
Well,
loaded and gone.
Amazing, yeah.
But I mean, you got to remember how many people we're talking about, and when you have a stagehand call of 60 to 70 guys, stuff's moving pretty quick, and you have a rolling stage too. So, that stage moves out of the way after all the backline gear gets off of it. All that stuff comes into the ground and heading out the door to trucks that are being methodically put into holes where they need to go.
And that's all your responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we do get obviously into buildings that are higher and more difficult to rig. So we'll do what we call a pre-rig. So when we have a day off the day before, I'll bring my riggers and usually my carpenters with me to help mark the floor, and we'll bring in a small local rigging crew from the union, and we'll pre-rig it so that when we come in the next morning to do quote unquote load in, the real load in, all the motors will be hanging in the air. Now, sometimes I cheat because I'm bored. So the trucks will be there. So while the guys are rigging in the pre-rig, I'll bring in like 10 stagehands and 4 truck loaders, and I'll just start dumping trucks onto the floor. So I'll line up all the video stuff, line up all the lighting stuff, line up the sound stuff, because I know where it goes. Everything, as you know, especially like with stacks and racks, is all color coordinated. So now I know what goes stage left and I know what goes stage right, and where the guys like to put their consoles and send stuff out to front house. So it makes for a much easier day. Yeah. But we do get into those situations where we can't possibly get it all done in one day, but it's normally because of the rigging challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm in awe of you and Doug Casper, who's been our tour manager.
Doug's awesome.
You guys are just so organized. It's just like, I hope Chris doesn't hear this because I don't want him to lower my pay. But I mean, it's such an easy day, for everybody, and it's all because of you and Doug.
I think
make everything just work.
And I think a lot of it has to do with attitude, and sometimes when I'm walking around on the floor, whether it be in this tour or on an arena tour, and I see people getting agitated, like my guys getting agitated, about something that just isn't moving fast enough to them. The thing that I've learned about in this business is we're not curing cancer, folks. Because if we were, we wouldn't frickin' be here.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be sitting on my yacht in Mallorca. But, You
have one of those?
Yeah, I wish. But it's like, relax. We're not saving the world here, is what I'm basically trying to say. And, somehow the show always happens. We always know this. I don't care what happens, breaks down. I don't care if a truck doesn't show up. I don't care what happens. The show always happens. For some reason, the show always happens.
Yeah.
And usually,
but the reason why it happens is because of you.
But a lot of it is about attitude and being willing to, you're not going to say, oh, well, this lighting stuff's all screwed up and I'm having trouble with video. We're going to call the show. That's it. It's over.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that?
No.
You just move through it and make what's going to work and get the rock stars up there, and the people are happy, and they're usually none the wiser anyways.
Right.
Right.
They're not comparing last night's show to this night's show.
The patron show, they got to see a good rock show, and off we go on to the next city.
Yeah. Wow, that's going to be fun. I hope I get to see one of those shows. Are you guys going to be in L.A. at all?
Yeah.
Where at the Staples Center?
We're going to be at the Forum, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for like 3 or 4 dates.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I hope I'm in town then. Or
maybe
I'll catch you somewhere else out on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I got to come and see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will be a spectacle, especially since we have 2 new principals in the band. So
yeah, and who is that?
It's Neil Finn from Crowded House.
Uh-huh.
And Mike Campbell from Tom Petty's, who's been with Tom since college days.
Yeah, right.
So Mike's a principal in the band now. And so is Neil. So it's going to be really interesting because, especially from a musical standpoint, because these guys are going to get to explore some of the old Peter Green, this old Fleetwood Mac stuff, the Peter Green days, like getting, Neil to sing some of the older stuff. And even back when Bob was in the band, they did Hypnotize and songs like that. So they're all really revved up about trying all this new stuff, all this old stuff.
Right.
They haven't done.
People,
so it's going to be more of a bluesy kind of thing. And of course they'll do the hits.
Of course.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the show is 2 hours and 45 minutes nonstop.
Really?
No intermission, which is pretty impressive for rock stars that are in their mid-70s.
Yeah.
Right?
Like for Mick, he's got to be pounding on his drums for that long. That's a lot of hitting. Yeah.
So 2 hours and 45 minutes straight through.
And the singers to sing. Yeah. But fortunately, it's not just one singer.
Right, yes.
It is split
They do
up.
share it up. Yeah. So I'm really, from music standpoint, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And it'll be good to be back with, guys that I've worked with for the last 15 years and that are part of our family.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
So any other stories that you want to share with us that you've experienced in all these years? Not that it's too many years, of course.
Sometimes I think it is.
No.
Gosh, I could think of, we're constantly playing pranks on each other, which is always, just to keep the validity, just to keep it light. We're always doing funny stuff and even sometimes involving the principals in it. And it's, that keeps it light and
Have
easy.
you ever had a show that you didn't think you might not be able to get that show up and running and
I did
perform
actually. Believe it or not, it was a Sheryl Crow show. And we were playing at the Borgata in Atlantic Beach, or
Atlantic City.
Atlantic City. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Atlantic City on Atlantic Beach at the Borgata, And sold out show, which I guess is, like 5,000 people or something like that. We're sitting around waiting for load in. We had just done a back-to-back. And no sign of the truck or the truck driver not answering the phone, nothing. So it's like 7 o'clock in the morning. We were going to load in around 9, but I was up in the bus. And
This is a one-truck tour?
One truck tour.
So everything is on that truck?
So everything's on the truck. Backline, board groups, lighting floor package, wardrobe cases, everything. So I can't get it. So I finally called the owner of the trucking company, and it's a very well-known trucking company. And I'm like, hey, listen, can't get a hold of your driver. Want to know when she's going to get here, and blah, blah, blah. So he says, I'll call you back. So it turns out that this owner of the trucking company and this so-said driver got in a fight over the course of the evening while she was driving to Atlantic City, and pulled over the truck and quit in the middle of the road, and he had no idea where the truck was.
Oh, geez.
So he had an idea about where it was and trying to get a hold of her. And by this time, she's not taking his phone calls or anything or willing to help whatsoever. They had to fly a guy. Luckily, it was on the East Coast, and they had a guy close by. They flew a guy out to where they thought the truck was, and it took them about an hour to find the truck. And he had gotten an extra set of keys to drive the truck. So he found the truck, and he started heading our way. And this truck driver, to this day, actually works for the trucking company I use now for Fleetwood. So when I see him, we always laugh about it because he was the guy that went and found the truck, and it was like hilarious.
Uh-huh.
So doors for the show were at 7 o'clock, and that truck rolled in at 6:25.
Oh, no.
In the evening.
Oh, no.
And doors were at 7 o'clock, show was at 8. We were ready for show at 8 o'clock. And it was a freight elevator load a big freight elevator load, but it was a freight elevator load from the street up 3 floors to the Borgata.
Wow.
If you're familiar with that building.
I think I have done a show there, but I don't remember it,
But it was crazy.
That is amazing.
Like, we got the show in in an hour and a half. Line checked, ready to go. No sound check, of course, because the doors were open.
Yeah.
But line checked, ready to go. Threw Sheryl out. She kicked ass for 2 hours, got off. That was it.
Did you bring in more stagehands to get the stuff out there faster?
Yeah, they did. And it's an IA house, so that got kind of expensive. But I do like we do here. It's like I got 10 on the in and 12 on the out. Not very big, but I think they rustled up like 6 more guys to help get that stuff up there. But it's a freight elevator load-in, so it's
so you can't really...
You can only go so fast and move so much at a time. So, yeah, that was the closest I've ever come.
But you still did it.
Yeah,
like
we
you
still
said,
did it.
No matter what,
it always still happens.
You're still going to make that show happen, and you did it even on time. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow, that's a good story. I like that.
Yeah, we were sweating bullets.
Yeah, I'll bet. I bet. How was Sheryl handling all that stress?
Well, she was, she doesn't get too stressed out about stuff like that. So, she's like, I'll just grab my guitar out of the bus and go up there and sit on a stool if I have to,
True. And she could.
She could have.
Yeah, she
totally.
could do that. Yeah.
She could have. Totally. If that's what it would have taken.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. All right. Well, I think we probably hit on everything in your great career, and it's been fun. I'm
Thanks.
so glad I got to know you on this trip.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
It's been really fun. I wish you were hanging out with us longer. It's great having such a pro on our side.
Anytime I get a chance, because sometimes I'll come out and I'll be Doug every now and again, because he'll be doing something else, or I'll come in and be the production manager, which I have in the past. I love working with this camp. I love working with Chris and the guys in the band, and the crew is always awesome. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
It's a real fun time. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Really mellow and just really good people, full on pro level.
Yeah, and Chris, he wants it to be right.
Yeah, exactly.
And which is good.
Yeah, and a super sweet guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, well, then we're going to sign off. Thank you again.
Thanks, Ross.
I appreciate having you here, Bobby, and we'll see you on down the road.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care, Bobby.
All right, take care.
The Rossaround Backstage Podcast, wants to thank my good friend, Tim Hines, for the original music that you are listening to now. We are currently looking for sponsors for the Rossaround Backstage podcast so that we can continue to bring you interesting stories like the one you just heard. I can be reached through Facebook or email me at rosspallone.com. Thank you for listening.